So mainly within the past few years, I have noticed that there's been a slight, very, very slight increase in popularity with regards to anything to do with the Barbie movies. Not necessarily the Barbie community as a whole, like the doll side of things, but the Barbie movies, which most of the popularity is actually heavily due to the fact that movie commentaries currently are actually such a popular thing here on YouTube. It's essentially the gaming community of this generation, this era. At first, it was very fake. It was every now and again, maybe 1, 2, or 3 older, mid to late millennials, fully grown adults, that were doing these commentaries, and they were heavily criticizing a lot to do with the Barbie movies. I mean, a lot. Soon enough, there was a podcast here and there, Barbie Movies podcast, I believe that's what it was called on Spotify. On the fandom scale of things, every now and again you would find like a meme video here and there, crack video. There would sometimes be a couple of fan fictions, really good written fan fictions, heaps of fan art. That was kind of the main dominance of the fandom years ago. Sometimes you would find a cosplayer here and there, if you're lucky. But in my personal opinion, it wasn't up until mid last year is when Aaron and Joe started making Barbie movie commentary videos that ended up giving them massive popularity. The majority of their fan base is actually people requesting more Barbie movie commentary from them. Pretty soon enough, meme groups on Facebook that are very popular that have way too many followers that I can't even remember how many. And then, of course, one that everyone considers to be the Barbie movie queen, Caitlin Loves Disney, made her ranking every Barbie movie video. I watched every Barbie movie so you don't have to, which was such a fun video to watch. I was actually watching Caitlin beforehand, so seeing that she did that video was just kind of like, oh. And then all of a sudden, it just sort of skyrocketed from there. And I do believe it's because those two YouTubers, for the most part, and a bunch of other YouTubers are slowly starting to do the same thing. Mikira the girl who is literally Barbie from Barbie Life in the Dream House. But I suppose the question is, why are Barbie movies all of a sudden getting so much clout and popularity when not even just 2 years ago they were very pushed into the dust as far as other fandoms go? The fandom was practically non-existent. So why? Why do people care about Barbie movies all of a sudden? Why are we analyzing them? Why are we ranking them? Why are we doing all of these things? That's a very easy question to answer, actually. Quarantine. Yes, it actually is that simple. Quarantine has made everybody become nostalgic and missing the simpler, easier times such as childhood and the things that they used to enjoy. So in other words, it's nostalgia over nostalgia. The key word is to why, though. Why is it so nostalgic when so many adults and parents have complained about the main brand being so stereotypically girly with pink and glitter that has people believed for so many years that the franchise was harmful to children, and particularly young girls, because they assumed that it was associated into thinking that girls had to be seen a certain way and not hard-working women, which anybody who's seen any of the Barbie movies clearly know that Barbie is not just some stereotypical princess in distress that gets saved by Ken, like as society loves to believe. In popular opinion, Disney princesses don't do that for the most part either. They have their own stories they have their own traits and stories that make them strong. Society loves to turn around and say that things are harmful and stereotypical in order to keep children away from liking a certain thing, because they know if, say for example, a little girl likes Barbie, they would probably like dresses, they would probably like makeup. Theoretically speaking, this is what parents automatically assume. Barbie's not harmful, period. Why all of a sudden does this generation of young adults and teenagers don't seem to have that same mindset that adults had in regards to Barbie? Why is it So many are very nostalgic over these movies, and they don't seem to deem any negative and harmful messages that their parents once did. In order to better understand this, I'll be briefly talking about 3 different but pretty similar Barbie movies. Barbie as Rapunzel, Barbie in A Christmas Carol, and Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses. Do have a very deep and subtle meaning in regards to its story, its messages, and its characters. Beware, this does contain spoilers, just in case. It's one of my favorites in the whole Barbie franchise movie as a whole. It's the reason why I even paint myself and I am an artist. It's a very simple story that even young kids can understand on the same level that adults can, which doesn't necessarily make it bad at all. The simplicity of the story doesn't demolish the message in the character arcs, and it easily distinguishes the characters as their own person, not bland and boring as often depicted by outside viewers in regards to Barbie movies. Rapunzel shares the same main characteristics as most Barbie protagonists. She's truthful, unselfish, and kind. The difference with this Barbie character in comparison to others is that these are her main personality traits, which might come across as bland. However, due to her lifestyle as a servant and the fact that she has been emotionally abused and neglected by her parental figure her whole entire life, and very submissive too, it makes sense that she's very pacifistic, which, for the record, there is absolutely nothing wrong with somebody being a pacifist. I said it. Rapunzel is probably the best Barbie character out of all 3 of these characters I'm about to talk about, in my opinion, because you don't need to be violent and you don't need to be hateful in order to get what you want and prove that bad people are bad. This Barbie movie is very interesting in regards to the fact that it's an adaptation of already existing story, and the source material it's based on doesn't really follow the same structure. It is very, very loosely based off Rapunzel by using the name of Rapunzel and the situation that she's in, and using the fact that there is a prince who is a love interest, and that's kind of all it really goes into. Rapunzel's hair doesn't really play a significant role in the way that it does with the original story, which is pretty interesting to think about, but it makes it its own thing. Interesting fact for anybody who doesn't know, this movie has a very sort of like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty type of feel. Rapunzel being a servant and talking to animals, likely due to the fact that Disney would not allow Mattel to use the name Aurora to make their own Sleeping Beauty Barbie movie. I'm pretty sure it was the same situation with Cinderella. They weren't allowed to create any of those adaptations. So they sort of like twinkled it up into one of their movies to make it more unique. I like, because it makes Barbie Rapunzel stand on its own and completely different from all the other Rapunzel adaptations that exist out there, which is probably not that many, because for some reason nobody in the entertainment industry likes to make Rapunzel-centric stories. Thanks. I feel very represented. She doesn't have to be a warrior. She doesn't have to swing around a sword like Stefan does in order to prove herself that she's strong and capable of standing up to the villain. She's strong because she's kind and considerate, and she knows how to stand up for her friends. Their romance isn't the main story. It's about Rapunzel getting out of that life. He was the French benefit. He wasn't the important part of the story. He just helped her. We didn't see them kiss up until their wedding. The one thing that I do genuinely see coming up as an argument, especially amongst Barbie fans, people do not know how they feel about Gothel's characterization. They feel that she is weak and not very well written. I don't agree. I think her character is pretty good for somebody who is emotionally abusive and manipulative and neglectful. Very detached from her emotions as well, because Rapunzel's father did not return her feelings, which is why she stole Rapunzel, because she was envious of Rapunzel's mother, envious of the idea that they got to have their own family while she left heartbroken. It's a pretty realistic situation. People get envious and get heartbroken when they get rejected, and people that are particularly not very good people to do very terrible and drastic things, and that is exactly what Gothel did. She assumed that her plan would have worked had it not been the fact that Rapunzel got out. This scene where Wilhelm breaks down after finding out that Gothel stole her. Gothel was going to win, even if she got locked up. that would have been satisfactory enough for her because she got to see him heartbroken over something that she deemed was part of the reason to why they didn't work out. Because Rapunzel is connected to her mother, and her mother is what got in the way of Gothel having a relationship with him. Gothel is a pretty realistic villain. Genevieve doesn't change in the same way that Derek does in the 12 Dancing Princesses, as it's his love for Genevieve and friendship is what motivates him to help her and her sisters, despite telling himself that a cobbler and a royal don't belong together. Now, I want to make this comparison with Gothel with another character who is very villainous. He was actually Barbie's first ever and currently only villainous protagonist, who does have a redemption arc, Eden Starling from Barbie in A Christmas Carol. She is definitely a completely different story in regards to Gothel, as her change and redemption is the story-centric focus point, whereas with Gothel, she was more of a side plot, an obstacle that Rapunzel had to overcome. While not my favorite, personally believe that Christmas Carol is one of the most overlooked due to the fact that its source material is a very popular literature and a very popular subject to talk about around Christmas time. There's a lot of bias around when a Christmas Carol adaptation happens. I remember specifically when Jim Carrey's Disney version came out, there was a lot of criticism all over the news, trying to say oh, this is gonna go great or it's gonna go bad, and let's see. A Christmas Carol is a very heavy subject to some people because the source material is basically brilliant. Barbie and A Christmas Carol doesn't really get that same respect. In comparisons to Disney's version, of course Mattel's not going to have the same budget in animation, writers, the music. Actually, most Barbie movies, even the current ones, actually have really good music. In regards to the fashion and the sort of aesthetics and the settings of the movies, I can understand to why they have this very unique feeling to them. Barbie movies are literally based off a Barbie fashion doll. And there's been fashion dolls where they've been based on fairy tales and medievals and Renaissance, and they have professional fashion designers coming in that understand the artistry field, so they have a better understanding on how to create that type of thing. With music, I don't know how Mattel does it, but for the most part, their music is brilliant. Mattel, because they're a toy company first and foremost, doing professional movies, doing really great storytelling isn't their number one primary goal. Despite some potential plot holes, awkward animation and jokes sometimes not quite hitting the mark. However, I do think they changed the story and the character in Barbie's A Christmas Carol enough for it to be its own thing, while still being related to A Christmas Carol. Sort of essentially the same thing as what I was talking about with Rapunzel. This is one of the first, and currently one of the only Barbie movies where Barbie is essentially the antagonist. This is also the first Barbie movie where Barbie herself does not have a hinted love interest whatsoever. This version of Barbie has no love interest whatsoever. Nothing. It would have been very easy for them to turn around and say that Freddie was in love with Eden, but they didn't decide to go that route. Instead of having a love interest be the focal point for Eden to redeem herself, it is actually in the form of a childhood best friend. However, Scrooge in the original story does have a love interest, which actually does have a play in his downfall in regards to the man that he becomes in the story that we know him to be at the beginning, as greedy and selfish. Eden, however, becomes vain and self-absorbed due to the trauma and the abuse that she went through as a child. I was 7 when this movie came out, and I thought that this was a pretty heavy subject to subject to kids. Not in a bad way, but oh wow. And instead of being able to be a kid, she was forced to work, and she grew up to become resentful and putting those, including her childhood best friend, below herself because that was what she was told to do. It's the same mentality that the majority of rich kids get. They are told by their parents to be a certain way and be treated a certain way because that's what the parent expects from the kid. So in return, because of their low self-esteem and all the masks they have to wear, that's how they present themselves. While her friendship with Catherine is part of the main story in Eden's redemption, unlike Diamond Castle, Thumbelina, and other movies that are based on the subject, Eden ends up saving herself by realizing her mistakes and the impact that she has on others negatively, as well as the impact that she's putting on herself, and realizing how alone and miserable that she becomes. And not only that, but they literally, instead of having Tiny Tim, who is little Tammy in this version, die, because she is not Catherine's daughter in this one. She is just an orphan in an orphanage. They close up the orphanage in the alternate time, in the future timeline. The orphanage ends up getting closed up, which was actually mentioned earlier on in the movie. And the children, they leave. They have nowhere to go, so they ended up going somewhere, anywhere. They just went into the middle of nowhere because they had nowhere to go. And due to the fact that Catherine lost her job because of Eden, she wasn't able to adopt Tammy in time. So the fact that with Tiny Tim, there's closure, it's horrible, but there is closure with him. We know that he died, and that's the end of it. Whereas with Tammy, she is essentially in the middle of nowhere, out there all by herself, defenseless, with a leg that is not in the best, who is not in the best health condition, with a bunch of people that can easily prey on her. That is pretty dark, and from the looks of it, I believe Tammy is supposed to be about like 6 to 8 years old, so she would have no idea how to protect herself. It's the fear of the unknown with Catherine, which is why she ends up becoming a hardened version of herself, and she essentially becomes Eden 2.0 at the end of the movie, in that part of the timeline. And while Catherine is associated to making Eden realize her mistakes, it's the impact that Eden realized she has on everybody as a whole, and especially young children. Children that she sees are in a very similar situation that she had as a child. She was orphaned, taken in by her aunt, and wasn't treated in a loving environment, and was instead having to fend for herself emotionally, whereas these children have to fend for themselves emotionally and physically. And that's what makes Eden realize the damage that she would potentially cause. She makes a change within herself because she realizes what she sees in those children. Just